Our first story takes us to the front lines of a controversial standoff between the Coast Guard and commercial fisherman Jim Blaes. Standing behind what he claims are Fourth Amendment rights, the fisherman refuses the Coast Guard's request to board his vessel and conduct a standard safety inspection.
Coast Guard conducts law enforcement boardings to ensure compliance with U.S. laws. They're mainly administrative inspection to check documentation, safety equipment, enforcement of other laws of the United States, and to check for fishery regulation compliance.
On routine law enforcement patrol off the Northern California coast, the crew of the Point Chico randomly selects the fishing vessel Helga for a boarding. The 82-foot cutter launches a rigid hull inflatable with the boarding team. The objective? To speak with the master of the vessel and request permission to board. What they don't anticipate is his response.
He asked if we had a federal search warrant, and I was kind of surprised by that. I'd never heard that question before. I signaled to my partner to radio to the Point Chico.
At that point, I contacted Coast Guard Group Monterey, my operational commander at the time, advised them of the situation, and asked them to come up on Channel 22 and listen to the conversations.
The Helga, this is U.S. Coast Guard Cutter Point Chico. I have no intentions of railroading you, sir. I want to send a boarding party over to check for proper safety equipment to check your catch. Now, I'll bring you up to a complete stop so I can send over the boarding party. Over.
I've been boarded plenty of times, and I know the drill. This is a violation of my civil rights. You are not boarding me without a search warrant. Over.
I monitored the conversation, ascertained that this particular scenario was escalating into a more threatening situation, and that we needed to take a step back and analyze it before we proceeded further.
The situation got very tense, and that's when the cutter told us to fall back behind on the opposite side of the cutter.
Your refusal to allow a Coast Guard boarding party to board your vessel puts you in violation of U.S. law. Our intentions are to board you either at sea or at the dock.
If you have a California Department of Fish and Game personnel on board, you can come check my catch. And you will not board this vessel without a federal search warrant.
He was standing on what he perceived as his Fourth Amendment rights not to be boarded without a search warrant.
The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause, describing the place to be searched and the persons and things to be seized. Now, which part of that don't you people understand? Over.
We had told him why we wanted to board his vessel and assured him that we weren't going to harm him in any way, and that we would make this as quick and easy for him as possible.
We all are protected by the Bill of Rights, except when we step on a boat. And that cannot be tolerated in the 90s. And I will no longer be singled out just because of where I make my living.
Captain, do you understand that by refusing to allow boarding party to come on board, you are subject to arrest? Do you understand that, sir?
Approximately 3 hours into the situation, he told the group Monterey that he would allow one unarmed Coast Guard member to come on board his vessel.
If you want to check my fish, if you want to check for fisheries violations, I'll permit one unarmed person aboard my vessel, and that is the way it'll be. Over.
We will not board your vessel in that manner. That is not in compliance with our internal safety policies.
I have just given permission to be boarded by one unarmed man. I have complied with the law. Do you read me? Over.
I wouldn't have allowed an unarmed boarding at that point anyway. I still didn't know how many people he had on board. He had made threats, and he was wearing a weapon.
As the communication continues between both parties, Mr. Blaes makes the decision to contact the news media.
He called KCCN, KCBA. He called everybody but Kmart. He had everybody involved in it, and it became a media frenzy.
The reason I brought it to the media is I feel the media saved my life. There was no witnesses there.
He was generating quite a bit of publicity, making a sensational story. The facts weren't all straight. We heard everything from that Mr. Blaes had alleged that the Coast Guard had boarded him 40 times in the last few years, when in fact, according to our database, the last time he was boarded was 3 years ago.
If they have a search warrant, they're welcome, anytime. But I will not have my rights violated anymore. Bottom line is, a lot of good people have been killed standing up for the Constitution of this country, including my father, who was killed in World War II. And for me to let this go on of what I've seen, it was unacceptable.
Neither one of us is going to win here. I guarantee you that. I told you, one person unarmed, and he can check my fish. I have complied. I'm out.
The right thing in our view at that particular time was to hold Mr. Blaes accountable for his actions without having a violent confrontation, and that's ultimately what we did.
The Coast Guard ended the 4-day standoff and did hold Mr. Blaes accountable for his actions in court. A federal jury convicted Mr. Blaes of 2 misdemeanor counts. The first, for resisting a Coast Guard boarding. The second, for forcibly resisting a Coast Guard inspection intended to verify his vessel's compliance with the Magnuson Fisheries Conservation and Management Act. Mr. Blaes faces a sentence of up to 6 months in prison and a fine of up to $50,000 for each of the 2 counts.